Hello, viewer, and welcome back to another episode of Crusader Kings 3 as we continue our expanse towards the Unite Africa decision. When we last left off, we had just finished another war, and that actually now leaves us over the domain limit. And so we need to slim ourselves down back to 3 holdings. And then we have a few other items before we continue our conquest onward. Editor Noble Vegas here. Unfortunately, I had an audio issue where it looks like I may have accidentally muted myself. So for a majority of this video, I will do my best from this point to try and narrate what my choices were and advancements as I continued here. Apologies for the poor editing work, but I will do the best I can. So at the end of our last video, we had just finished conquering the county of Crewe. That allowed us to have the borders that we have now. When we began looking through on best options, we did not want to give away Wenyan or Grebo. These were very close to titles that we were holding on for the Wenyan Duchy, and we would eventually settle on Crewe, again because it was the most recent that we added, that we could easily give away without it affecting the current status that we had. We had just brought it on, it would take a lot of investment, and so we settled on Crewe as the one to give away the title for. So as you can see, we had a few options. They were all lowborn, but 2 of those were our steward and our chancellor, which we felt were good options as they were essentially working for us anyway. To give them vassal status would allow them to like us more, to very likely have more loyalty. We looked at other options. There simply weren't very many other than, again, just being simply lowborn. So between the steward and the our chancellor, we decided to go ahead with our chancellor. I don't remember the reasons why we selected them, but we did give them Crewe, allowing them to be a powerful vassal for us. And since they were already on the council, it didn't create any issues there. We did have a peasant rabble as far as factions against us, but that's bound to happen when you start making conquests of this nature, even at tribal levels. They are things that happen quite regularly. It's not anything we were worried about. We knew that there would be an uprising eventually. At a discontent of 94% and rising, it was bound to happen, but the county that was involved, the numbers that were going to be there, anything that rose up, we would easily be able to handle with the manpower that we had. So with that in mind, we looked at what our next steps would be as far as expanding our territories and our borders. And the first place that we looked was actually on a religion basis. In order for us to be able to stay under religion and not have to worry about conversion, we would definitely have to expand to the east to see what options we had in that aspect. As far as the title, we wanted the Kingdom of Guinea. As you can see here, there was only 1 or 2 territories that we could add that would allow us to stay under the ACOM religion, but most of our conquest would be to the north or to the west. So this is the title we wanted to move for, and we want to make sure that we work in that direction so that when our character does ultimately die, we would be able to stay completely united and not have to worry about splits. Our first potential target was Gola to our west. They were currently in a war with Kono, and they had an ally with Loma. And so this was an option that we were looking at because with that war going on, they would be fighting each other, allowing us to come in and basically clean up against Gola if we were to take the territory just to our west. So that seemed the most ideal target, and I believe that's what we do end up ultimately settling on. We look at our war cost here as when we zoom in, we didn't even see troops nearby, which means they were off fighting in a different territory. We take a look as far as conquering the county of Gola, and it's going to cost us in prestige instead of piety. Piety is only when you're within the same religion, otherwise it's based off of prestige. And so we looked at the potential options. We looked at what we would need as far as the higher titles or other titles and what our best options were. If we move towards the west here and take Gola, eventually we'll be working towards the Duchy of Kono. And that between the Duchy of Bassa and Wenyan would definitely give us more than enough to work towards the kingdom title. We could move our way in towards Sapi as well, and that was just planning towards the overall larger goal of the entire kingdom. So we come in, we declared our war. Again, it was a basis of prestige instead of piety. Here we're just checking our prestige values just to see how a war like this would affect us. 38 is not a whole lot, especially with us having just shy of 300. So we declare our war against Gola for the county of Gola. We relocated our rally point and then raised all of our troops. And from there, we immediately went in towards Gola as, you know, that's our war goal. We wanted the war goal first. Anything that came to us, we figured we could take care of pretty easily. So we had a search for a wet nurse pop up. This was something we started just before recording, and we had an option come in. The only issue was that with either option, we would end up gaining stress, something that we try to avoid just because it can definitely get out of hand, especially as you get a little older. And so we were reading through, and then we began checking what our options were, ultimately making the decision that we needed to. I think we went with the good aptitude in Diconti. While it cost us more and it was a little bit more in stress, we knew that we would have options available to us to help reduce that aspect. And we also knew that the events that would come off of having the better wet nurse would be far more beneficial. We checked our stress levels were very low at this time, so gaining a little bit of stress or even a moderate amount was not going to be a deal breaker in any aspect. And so when we looked back through, we ultimately settled on DeConti here because of the good aptitude. So with that option out of the way, we continued turning back to our war progress. And as we move in, we can see that our enemy is already actually in battle, which means if we have to put up with either of them, we're now in a much more comfortable position troops-wise. And so this made the war effort rather streamlined and simple. We stayed here for the siege and briefly looked at other possibilities, other ideas. And this is where our faction does give rise. And at first we briefly thought, well, we could give something away, but ultimately we knew we had the troops. It wasn't going to be a difficult battle. We would just focus on our current war first. Once we had the war goal, we would take on the troops that they had sent in. We especially saw that because the siege was far too small. Those going into the siege was far too small, and so they were not even making any progress. So that'll just reinforce the decision to stick with our current war, gain our extra territory first, and then move on from there. We did briefly look at splitting and moving off the troops that didn't need to stick around for the siege, but we felt that that would ultimately leave us a little too vulnerable in a counterattack, and so we would reorganize those, bring them back together. And then we had a Leviathan event. This one was a little bit trickier to discern how we wanted to proceed with the Leviathan event, as here I'm reading through it as I normally do when these events pop up. The first option of getting the harpoons, I believe, did not have much of a return to it. We liked the idea of lowering stress because it helped us with the stress increase from the wet nurse search. We could have gone all out with the fearsome majesty to leave it. And so here's where we started looking at our options. The first option, our possible outcomes to actually get anything out of it was not great. So we decided to go the simple route, just take the money, let others handle it, and take the stress loss. The critical stress here, we could gain prestige, which would be valuable towards war, but the stress would actually hit a level 1 critical moment, and I wasn't really focused on trying to take that up as an option. So we take the middle option with the stress loss, and then again, turn back to the war. We're now working down in our last days here. We notice that we're being raided. That happens from time to time, especially in the lower regions of Africa here under tribal, as your neighbors will come in and take pot shots. There was nothing we could do about it this time. As they came in, they raided, and they quickly left. We finished up the siege to take the county of Gola. and then began moving our troops to counterattack the fact that they were besieging the capital for Bassa. We allowed troops to move in while we were keeping an eye on the peasant rabble, which had already moved off and moved out of our territory. They would eventually end up circling back. We knew they would, but again, it was a minor issue to deal with, and so we kept our focus on the war goal, as we knew once we finished this battle in Bassa, there would be it would be an end to our war here. Again, we're pointing out the fact that we'd been recently raided in Crew. It's new territory that was just added to us. We weren't gaining a lot out of that, as it was very low county control, so it wasn't anything that we felt too much of an impact for. Here we had a servant of honesty moment with our daughter Gorbwe, and when these typically pop up, I don't take into account too much as far as the selections. I usually just go with the first, which keeps the trait. In this case, it's the trait of honest. And that's because there's no point in taking a stress increase unless it is our heir or the next, our heir apparent, our next role that we would eventually be playing. When you have the option to sculpt it, you want to go for the best you can, but in this case, just let them keep whatever trait they have. Don't worry about the stress, and then we will move on from there. So go into the battle, it's already a victory. They're moving off, and we can see that we have a 100%. So the first thing we do is actually we look for ransoms that we can give away, like we've done before. It's a good, easy way to make a few extra bucks before conquering somebody's territory, as sometimes they just won't be there anymore. In this case, there wasn't any, so we enforced the demands. That war is over, and now we can turn our focus towards the peasant rabble. We do have a domain limit increase that we have to resolve again. Now that we have Gola taken over, it's been added to our domain, but we only have a domain limit of 3. So as we send our troops to start marching towards the east, take care of the peasant rabble, we again look into our options, and this one was pretty straightforward. Our steward still needed to be landed as far as titles, and so we allowed that to happen because it would make him a powerful vassal. He'll want to be on the council, and he's already there. So essentially we're just rewarding those that are providing us with good behavior, so to speak. Again, we turn back. Crew is now under siege, which is why the peasant rabble left Nuon and moved towards the east, is they could not conquer for Nuon. And then we had the negotiator event pop up for us, and I believe there was a bit of a interaction between a couple of other characters. So this was, if I remember correctly, this was a challenge event. I believe it was for learning. And so our first option, we could gain prestige and had a small chance for a perk option. The firm hand perk option, which just adds to dread. Instead, we had a 92% chance of gaining some coin out of this. There was quite a bit of debate going back and forth, because allowing that 92% chance towards gaining gold would definitely go again towards improvements within the counties that we conquer, especially as we're able to expand our realm and eventually increase our domain limits. But at the same time, we also knew that that prestige was going to be valuable, because as we expand north and west, when our options to the east begin to run out, we would need the prestige option to be able to keep moving forward, because even construction at the tribal level here still requires a prestige cost. So we kept flipping back and forth as we debated which direction we should ultimately go, and we ultimately settled on the prestige gain, as again we would need that for additional conquests. And then we had another quick event popping up, just letting us know that the Christian world now has the access to crusades. Not too worried about it at a low tribal level in southern Africa, as we will not have a whole lot of interaction with Christians for quite some time. And we have the possibility towards the future that we could even convert to Christianity to avoid any Crusader options. Not anything we were too worried about, so we quickly dismissed that. And then we continue on as we prepare for our battle against the peasant rabble that rose up during our previous war. Very low numbers. There were less than 200 by the time we got there because of attrition. easily set them aside, and something that I like to do when playing through is uh, first I set up and execute the prisoner who led the peasant rabble. It doesn't really do anything other than cost you a little bit of piety and gain some dread, but it's just something I like to have a little bit of fun with, and I'll immediately execute whoever's in a revolt leadership against me before settling and enforcing demands from the war. And so now that we have everything back to a peace level, we began looking through, and the first thing we wanted to do, since we conquered outside of the Acom religion, was to begin a process of conversion. It will take about 25 years for that process to take place, simply because it's just recently after a war, so it was a forced conquest and now a forced conversion. And then we resumed the um, increase county control for Nuon now that the peasant uprising is over. We began looking through options that we had for us nearby, the next steps that we would take now that we have added Gola to our territory, and we start really focusing in on the kingdom title. We were coming very close to the number of territories that we needed, and the big focus was making sure that we had the coin as well as the land to be able to finish that process. And the first step was essentially to create a second duchy, as well as save up the coin that we needed in order to complete that, as these final steps were really bringing us close to creating that kingdom title and being able to move forward. So again, we reviewed through our court as well as our options. We had to make sure that our title successions were what we were expecting, and we remembered that under a Confederate partition, the duchy would automatically be created. The Duchy of Wenyan would automatically be created upon our character's death and given to our second son, which would create a split within the territories that we already had, and that's something that we were trying to avoid. So we knew that time was essentially of the essence, even though our character is still fairly young, that we needed to continue expanding to get to the 11 counties that we needed. That way we could create the duchy title of Wenyan for ourselves, and then immediately be able to create the kingdom title for the kingdom of Guinea. So as we continue to look around with the counties that were on our border, the options that we had to be able to conquer and add to our list so that we can work towards that kingdom title, there were many options available to us. We had options to the north, as they were a natural direction that we wanted to start moving, especially with Loma and Manding starting to really gain in size. We ultimately looked at the different costs that were involved. Subjugate would cost 500 prestige for us, which is something we did not have near enough of. And so again, we were looking at Manding as it was beginning to really consolidate. Loma was a great potential if we could afford a conquest under subjugation, as that would add 3 territories all at once for us. But again, because we could not afford that, that wasn't really available to us. So we looked here at Toma, as it's a single county, nothing in the way of allies to be worried about. We definitely had a much larger number, and so we declared war against Toma for a conquest for that county. We moved our rally point, raised our troops, and immediately went right to work in conquering that territory for ourselves, as we figured this was going to be yet another very quick war for us to be able to conquer. So we're moving our troops in. We are checking their ally value just to see if that would be something that we're worried about. Looked around for them briefly and found that they were a pretty good distance away, so they really weren't going to be a factor in this war. So we watched our troops as they moved in. You can see the allies finally landing in Sherbro, but weren't really all that interested in coming to their aid very quickly. They move around a little bit. We go into a battle, very fast battle there. Of course, victory is achieved in a short time. They move off, and even their allies started getting stuck against other uh, armies within the area. And so they began moving towards us, and working towards a quick battle that they were going to ultimately lose as well. They come in, and that battle, you can see, just quickly moves out of their range and achieves victory in a short amount of time. And it's at this point that my audio does finally come back here in a moment. So you'll hear that audio switch back. Again, apologies for the poor audio as well as all the narrating that had to occur here. Enjoy. So this is pretty effectively what the first rounds of the Unite Africa campaign are, is making these fast additions to your kingdom. As you get bigger, you have to deal with cultures and religions a little bit more heavily than we are now, as well as with larger nations like we have Ghana up here that is very large. That's when it starts to kind of slow down a little bit. More decisions need to be made, and you need to look at alternative ways of expanding your territory. But for now, the first goal is to gain to kingdom level. Once you get to there, that pretty much gives you a solid foundation. You can restructure a few things, you can work from there, and you can make some good advancements. Alright, so we have another learning lifestyle unlocked. Again, we have anatomical studies. Court physicians cost less to hire, and their treatments have better outcomes. Scholarly circles, which is learning per levels of devotion +2, or faithful clergy opinion +10. So I know it won't gain us a whole lot because I believe we're still on the first level of devotion, but it still will give us a good addition of learning, taking us from 22 to 24. And so we're going to go ahead and take scholarly circles as we finish off working towards the scholar characteristic. Alright, back to our war. We're on pause. Now we're going to actually battle against both of them at the same time, but it will still be a handy victory as we greatly outnumber them in both aspects. We will finish off the siege here in 20 days. We have an enemy combatant. We still cannot ransom. We do have one ransom. Double check our... Yep, will not impact anything. So let us ransom for an extra bit of coin. They have ransomed, and now we will enforce our demands. Again, back under above the domain limit. And so we will work at our new title that we have gained. And again, grant that out. Looks like the only options we really have are mostly lowborns or our family. And so we're going to keep that running. We got somebody who's not all that happy with us. So we're going to use this to our advantage and gain a little bit of... Actually, let's double check our counselors. We have 3 powerful vassals on our council now. And so if we're going to add somebody, we want to make sure that we can take on anybody. So Nanahuela of Crew, we can easily handle when he gets upset for losing his position. So let's find somebody with a higher chancellor value than 12. So again, we'll go back to our title here. Grant the county out. And Yakpazwa Dida has a value of 19, which is a very good number indeed. He's the highest that we have as well. So we're going to grant this title there. We're not going to have a powerful vassal who wants a position. We are going to grant it to our highest. And I'm pretty sure Uella will not have... Yeah, he doesn't have much of an advantage anywhere else. So we're going to assign here. Nanahuela is not going to be happy about that, but he only has 171 troops to his name. We're not worried about that. Now, once we are able to centralize under a kingdom, we'll be able to restructure a few of these to where we will not have this issue, at least not as high a level as it is. Alright, we have now disbanded from there. And we can look at our next steps. The Duchy of Loma, we don't quite have the value for subjugation as it's 500. And we don't want to really conquer just one county from them. If we can help it. So I'm going to look around. We're going to see, I think for a subjugation it's 500 regardless. I think our next best bet is actually to go after the Yamana of Mao. He has no allies, only 660 troops. We are getting a little light here. So I think that's what we're going to do, is we're going to let it run for a minute so we can replenish our troops. And we will see if there are any new constructions that we can commit to. I don't think there are at this point, because to gain level 2, yeah, we need the Mott's innovation for some of these. New one is still building. We actually can expand in the Chiefdom of Wenyan. And as I like, because it helps out so much when it comes to tribal, we're going to go ahead and construct palisades here. Acquaintance has died in the dungeons. That's not a problem. A little light on champions. Mortal body we can recruit. Well, here's a nice little surprise. Actually, no, this is one that we've had and it came back to us. The Chiefdom of Gola, which is one we recently gave away. He ended up dying, and so now we've inherited back, along with a lot of gold. The only problem is we've got a very big prestige hit right now. So we're going to re-grant this back out. And again, we want to look at our council. We need a steward. And Garnawe looks to be a great option there. So we are going to grant him that title. He's a younger guy, so we should be able to find somebody to marry fairly quick. And in the meantime, we will add him to our council. So we have two options here for culture change. We can promote acceptance, or we can promote the culture. And in doing so, the county's culture will change to our culture. Whereas with acceptance, it would be allowed and create greater cooperation between the two. I think for now, we're actually going to want to promote the culture, and we're going to target Toma with it, because we're already targeting convert faith within Gola. So we'll continue that on. We've got our construction running. We don't have any more options. Actually, the Palisades cost, because that was that a prestige? I don't remember. Still not going to do a grand tournament. We'll dismiss those. We do have men-at-arms regiment that we can station. And this is for our bush hunters. Alright, so we will station those here in Wenyan. Because I believe in Nuon we already have station regiment. Oh, it's our light footman. So yeah, let's go ahead and swap that out, because that gives us a much more powerful boost with far more damage being created if they're in Nuon. So we're going to put them there. That's been reorganized. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a cut in here for this episode. We've been able to add Gola and Toma to our borders, and when we come back, we will very likely go up against Mao next. And then we'll consider our targets from there, as we can also continue still moving eastward to add to our titles. So again, I have been Noble Vegas. This is our continued United Africa playthrough. If you have any comments or ideas or any questions, leave them below in the comment section, and I will see you again in the next video.